Yes.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? All right? It's a while. How are you? Good.
Are you addicted to AI? I saw papers already.
Then, gentlemen, Heiko Kuhn, please.
Good question.
Papers already.
Basically, yeah. Okay. So basically, my approach now is I've launched a new website based on my AI research, and it's called.
X-Video.
It's called. It's called. I've got. There is a little piece I did about that today. Funny enough. It's called MarxistAI.ai. So that will be my future reference point. If you want to find out about Marxist thinking in the modern era, that will be the place to go to. The go-to location. Marxist.ai. I will in future refer to that quite often. So what I'm doing, and I'll talk about this because I think that the method I'm applying will be useful to people, not only people who are into Marxism, but useful to people in general, about how to use the technology of our era that's available to us and that allows us to achieve certain things that will be beneficial to you, quite apart from the dangers that AI poses. Now, we've discussed this a little bit over the last week. I also want to explain how you can use it to achieve certain things. So that's the methodology I'm going to try and approach, unless I get dragged in a different direction. So for example, this is the last couple of days. I've been doing some research on a number of questions. This stuff here, the first few pages, is about today's news. So the news that was in the about the Americans abandoning the European Union and opposing NATO and making a deal with the Russians. So that's the question I put in there. And I used the Chinese AI system called Quen for this, and I use that for a number of reasons. It's not that I'm completely opposed to the other ones, but they produce different results, and sometimes there will be an orientation focused around different themes, different theoretical foundations that are used in the Chinese AI that is superior to that used in the Western AI. And there's been a long discussion about this in the last few weeks about DeepSeek and ChatGPT, but they didn't really talk much about this Quen one. So I've been using the Quen one. For example, just for my own benefit, if you look on ChatGPT and you look up my name, it comes up with nearly nothing. Whereas if you look at Quen, or you look at DeepSeek and you type my name, and quite a lot comes up. Not only does a lot come up, but unlike Google, where you'll find material curated for you by Google, presenting to you the algorithm decision about what you should see, Quen and ChatGPT, if you asked them about my viewpoint, you could ask them to say, for example, to Quen, what would Heiko Kuhn say about, the American decision on to make an alliance, or better said, to oust the Europeans from negotiations in Ukraine, and it will come up with quite a reasonable assessment of what I would say about that question. And so that's the beneficial element. I remember we discussed about these questions maybe a year and a half ago, and at that time the responses from ChatGPT were very poor on any detailed question like that. That is no longer the case. I was asked about by Sam here I'll take you one sec. By Sam here a few minutes ago, how accurate is it? And I said, well, probably 90% accurate. 90% accurate. And it depends on the nuance with what AI you're using. So I would say both ChatGPT and DeepSeek and Quen I would prefer over DeepSeek, are about 90% accurate. But there'll be different things they get wrong. Then your task, when you're confronted with information that is 90% accurate, is to identify what's 10% wrong. And to specify, if you're going to circulate that or disseminate that to others or use that for your own benefit or the benefit of others, you need to be able to identify the 10% or at least inform others that where that 10% is likely to be. So you add the element of skepticism into it. Now, obviously with a 10% error rate, that's quite significant. It could lead you, if you relied upon it, let's say to make personal decisions or to make political decisions, you might end up messing yourself up. And so, but then when Sam asked me the question, how reliable is it? If you rely, let me put it the other way around. If you relied upon the BBC, the Guardian, the Financial Times, the Economist, the mainstream news, and the overwhelming majority of so-called serious podcasts on the internet, the accuracy rate for the news media, the mainstream news media, would be about 50 to 60%, I believe. No higher than that, which means 40% is manipulation or lies or idiocy. If you relied upon serious Sorry?
That's just you stated.
It is me stating that. Yes, it's me stating that. It's me stating that. Of course it's me stating that. What else could I do here?
Well, you present evidence of that.
Telepathically communicating.
50% true. You could show
I said,
I think evidence that would
it's
support
about.
that.
I said, I think it's
Oh, okay,
about.
fair enough.
I will present to you some information, for example, about these issues, and you can judge yourself. What I'm going to do, my approach to the question is the following. I am now doing basically research every day based on this. I will look into a subject matter or 2 or 3 subject matters, and then I will prompt and cross-prompt until such time as I've done for the day.
Oh, so I'm going to
Then
research, you're using 2 different AI
I'm
engines
using
to do your
multiple,
research.
3 in
Is
particular.
DeepSeek free?
And the different models they've got. And then having done that, I will, on the basis of my previous knowledge and my ability to do research in normal channels of research, databases, academic, scholarly work and so on, I will inform my analysis of the AI responses. I then post that material. I made a website where I can, in Marxist AI, where I can upload the material that I've downloaded. I can edit that material in boxes which are available, check the accuracy of them and amend them, and then I can re-upload it and publish it as a finished file. So that's the method I'm approaching towards the analysis of what's going on. And I'm open for anyone to look at that material and to provide criticism, to do exactly the same as I've done, look at that material, upload it to an amendable file, and amend and adjust and criticise it. Like we've done in the past with Wikipedia. When Wikipedia was open, anyone could go on there, change whatever they want, amend whatever they want. Now it's controlled by the guardians of Wikipedia who control it.
that years ago when they released it.
One minute.
You think this AI will make super?
Well, what?
Do you think this AI, these services like DeepSeek, ChatGPT, do you think people are going to be dumbed down?
It depends on how you use things. It depends on how you... I do think it's very important to get in early, because at the moment the responses it's giving are increasingly accurate and increasingly prescient and intelligent. However, I believe that as time goes on, that will change. And that will change partly because the responses that are being given now will also be the foundation for the responses in the future. And the information we've got now, including the news sources, will be the information of the future. But it won't necessarily result in smartness. So, for example, on the question which Piers Corbyn is famous for raising, and the other question, the question about... not just one, on one of the questions that that you raised a few weeks ago. And he said stuff about 5G. I won't repeat what he said, because that statement that he made, one of the statements he made, would get what I say struck off YouTube. So I'm not going to say that. However, and something is
censorship.
I mean, I'm not going to say it, not because of that. I also don't think it's accurate. But in any case, there is an issue, a wider issue, which is 5G a health risk? Now I thought, well, that's one element, and there's other elements you might associate with that. But then I asked, is 5G a health risk? And the initial response was that 5G is not a health risk, and that 5G is monitored by an organisation. The health risk of 5G is monitored by an organisation called the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. This organisation advises all the Western governments on the safety of 5G. Not only of 5G, but also of 4G and the rest of it.
7G.
Then I cross-question it. This is ChatGPT. I cross-question it and I asked, what exactly is this organisation? What is it? Who do they represent? And then it says, the ICNIPRP is a private NGO, not a government agency. And critics argue, because I said, what would be the criticisms? That it lacks democratic accountability, has ties to the telecom industry, has past affiliation with industry groups, and controls the regulatory framework. So then I continued about this sort of thing, what it ignores about the threats. And then I asked, well, does everybody treat it the same way? And then it says, no, other countries have stricter limits on radio frequency exposure.
What's your problem with 5G?
Other countries, I'm telling you what it is. I'm telling you now what it
The problem
is.
is that it's being supplied by telecoms companies.
No, I'm telling you, I'm trying to explain. Are there potential health risks?
What are the risks?
According to, I'm just going to tell you
I'm
now.
impatient. I'm used to TikTok. Just tell me now.
So the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation, they say there are no health risks. However, this is the interesting bit, which I don't think Piers was on, but I'm interested. And it said here the following. The guidelines of this organisation are followed by the UK, the EU and many other countries, but some nations enforce far lower exposure limits. Guess which countries? China and Russia. China and Russia, Switzerland and Italy. Switzerland and Italy. Why do they choose lower limits? Let's take the case of China. They have a precautionary approach. They recognise non-thermal effects. There's long history of independent research in Russia and China about radiation exposure. State-controlled regulation means they have tighter control over the industry. Military and security considerations have led them to consider stricter limits. And environmental health awareness over long-term investigations throughout the Cold War of the impact of radiation on the population. Does that mean that China and Russia are correct? No, but it does mean that, some of the most powerful countries in the world with the longest experience of the impact of radiation are not willing to bow down to a private NGO linked in with the telecom industry to accept the argument that 5G and radiation exposure from these telecommunication devices are safe. That's what it says. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Does that mean 5G is not being rolled out in China?
No, what it means is, when they rolled out 5G in China, this is where Piers was wrong when he discussed this question in the past, when 5G is rolled out, the level of radiation permitted is 100 times lower than that in the West. 100 times lower. So they have 5G. I don't know how they do it. You can go into the detail of it. You can look it up. You can look it up yourself. But I can't. I'm not an encyclopedia.
A little bit of radiation.
Nor am I AI myself. All I can do to you is indicate to you. No, it's not all it is. That's not correct. It's not all it is. The encyclopedia is Wikipedia. The Encyclopedia Britannica and other things. What AI is doing is drawing together a series of logical steps to analyse past data and to draw new conclusions about that past data. It is not just rehashing information from the past. That is not correct.
Commercially facing AI interfaces do not do that. They scrape data and they give you the data back. If you ask it a question about the data, it will give you an answer, but it won't. There's no new data that it will give you. It's capable of generating new data, but not for you or me.
Why not?
Because we don't have the full access to the fucking whole thing. We have a ported. No, we don't. We have a ported version. That is basically a search engine.
That's
fucking.
not correct. That's not correct.
Right.
You can download Quen, which is an open source program, AI program. You can download different levels of it, depending on the type of computing power you have at your disposal, and you can base your entire model on information that you input.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think about the cost of living crisis? What do you think about don't you think cost of living crisis, declining living standards, declining lifespans in this country,
Changing the
the
subject.
number of men in your age group committing suicide, not eating healthily? Do you not think this is more of an issue than whether or not we might get a little bit of radiation? And maybe there's a 1% chance of cancer.
That wasn't the issue I was addressing.
No.
The issue I was addressing is how can you use the technology available today to investigate questions and identify what is truth from untruth. Truth from untruth. Remember discussing about the COVID-19 pandemic?
never came
Let
back
me
to
just
my
talk to you about
question.
that 1 minute. So I was looking at the question. I looked at the climate change stuff, but that's another issue.
Tell us about Reform UK.
I asked.
want to know about.
I mean, to be honest with you, there are plenty of people in Britain who will tell you, and plenty of people in America, and JD Vance, and all the rest of them, and all the podcasts, and all the TikTok, and all the rest of the nonsense. You're supposed to sit there and suck in whatever the latest exciting podcast is of the day. And whatever the issue is of the day, the latest bomb in Gaza, the latest agreement with Russia, the latest conflict with Zelensky, the latest... I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to investigate what the fundamental driving forces in humanity and in society are today. My task is not here to talk nonsense to you about some latest story in the news, although I've sometimes done that to motivate people or mobilise people or for my own ego in a meeting. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make people aware of where we are at the moment, technology between man and technology, and man and man, and therefore how we can use the tools available to us. These are more powerful.
Can I ask my question?
Just one tiny.
Can I ask my
I'm
question?
terribly sorry for not replying. I'll reply in 1 second. If you imagine somebody with an advanced Kalashnikov and a bazooka and a television station and a radio station in the year 2010, would they be considered a dangerous person or a person with enormous potential power or risk? This is what you have on your mobile phone now with AI. You have a weapon that can be used in various ways.
So you're saying someone might use our phones to give us radiation
I've
poisoning?
just been going through this for you a minute ago.
Heiko,
Okay,
are you saying...
let me just
come to my
one further
question.
example, which I pointed out to Addy here a few minutes ago. I asked the AI, in this case ChatGPT, had we had mass PCR testing in 2018 to 19 at the same scale as was done in 2020-21, could you have had a coronavirus pandemic declared across the world in 2018-19?
Yes.
And what percentage of deaths in care homes and hospitals would have been declared as coronavirus deaths? The answer it gave, between 15 and 30% of all deaths would have been declared as coronavirus deaths. That's the answer from ChatGPT. If there had been a coronavirus pandemic, and I didn't do this just on that question and it replied with that, I did it cross-questioning again and again and again based on the criteria used in the last few years. It is not a question of trust. It's a question of am I capable, are you capable of using your intellect and using your ability learned over the last years in your interaction with the internet and with knowledge databases and with information available and with what you know from your personal environment. Are you able yourself to assess what is correct and not correct? That's the question. It's not about just my reply. Is my reply accurate? It's not about is AI's reply accurate. It is, are you able to use the tool available to you to achieve your objective, to know nearer, more accurately the truth?
yes.
Are you able to do that? That's the question I'm discussing. Sorry, he's
Thank you. My question. Thank you. So you said that your the answer that it gave for questions about what you would say on a certain topic was about 90% accurate.
It was, well, I said that was quite
my
accurate.
question.
I said in
yes.
general its answers about 90%
Yeah,
accurate.
it's good. So is that based on written its knowledge of your written work, or
No,
does it include your verbal
I'm talking about all the information. The responses it
But you
gives
talked
are
about
about
you.
90% accurate.
But
That's
you
what
said
I
about you. But you said about
I
you.
said the difference between ChatGPT and Quen, that's where I referred to my own writings, is that because I used to be a writer for the Chinese media,
Yeah.
and I've written more than 170 articles for the mainstream media in China, the Chinese databases have a more accurate knowledge of what I write. The British the ChatGPT had no knowledge of what I've written. And if I asked it to present an argument based on what Haikoku said, my name, it didn't turn up with anything. If I asked the Chinese one to turn up with an argument based on what I've said, so analysing today's events based on past publications of mine, it's got enough model material to do that.
But it's all your publications. That's all.
That was just
That's
on,
all
that's
your
just saying
publications.
if I want to assess what Haikoku would say today about Ukraine, what would you say it would be? And it would produce an answer based on the material that it's used as its data resource to gather and to formulate its AI knowledge base.
I wanted to see if it included, say, for example, your videos and stuff like that.
You would think
it might do at some point in the future.
That's correct. ChatGPT is certainly based on trawling all the knowledge available on the internet. And at some stage, they will get round to the point where they grab basically everything from YouTube, process the the text files of these speeches at YouTube, and then they would be able to not only to present an argument like I would present it, they will be able to make a deep fake video of me speaking to you lot at Speaker's Corner in future about a subject that hasn't happened yet.
So you stay
they
home
will be
next
able
week
to
then,
do
yeah?
that. And I've done already. I haven't done the. I am not a deep fake now.
You stay at home.
Just in case you think I am. In case you think I am. I am not a deep fake now, but in future, it is perfectly possible that you'll come to Speaker's Corner and there will be a hologram speaking like me, saying what I might have said in the event, even after I'm dead. Look at ABBA.
That's for sure.
Look at ABBA. They got thousands of people going every night to go and watch a hologram of them performing, and they get as excited about that as if ABBA was there, and that's not even using AI or not any sophisticated level. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that obviously people are scrolling through TikTok and they find all this useless information. You also said it's used technology to reach a conclusion, to reach a conclusion that is beneficial to what you want to do, essentially, to your objective. Now, you've already touched on it yourself. Basically, ChatGPT doesn't think; it takes the information available. That information available on the internet.
Yes, but you can think.
Exactly, yeah. You just
But
said that.
you can think.
Well,
How can you verify the
You're asking me to
information
do
it's
something very complex.
You can't.
Something that I rely on ChatGPT
Take that on
for.
faith.
You search that.
On the contrary, I'm asking you to use your existing knowledge
You said-
as a human being who does his own independent discovery of the world until this point, whatever that is for each individual, and then you challenge it to produce scenarios or responses to key questions that are of interest to you, and then you cross question the information that is given. But I do not agree that the information is simply rehashed. I do not agree with Noam Chomsky that says it's if you like a dead instrument that produces nothing. It is not what I'm getting in the response I get. As I said, they're about 90% accurate, whereas the news, which is the basic source we presently gain our information from, is about 60% if you're lucky.
At the most. At the most.
From my own knowledge. For example, I've spent my whole adult life studying Marxism. I've spent my whole adult life studying it. You don't have to agree with it. You may think it's nonsense, but I've studied. That's the point. So from that, when I enter questions about this question, the responses it gives are actually higher, at least in relation to Quen, are higher than 90%, about 95% accurate. And I can identify myself where I think they are incorrect. I can correct those parts myself and republish them on my website Marxist.ai, which I've started doing last week. So you'll be able to look yourself and see whether you think that's accurate or not.
What kind of questions are you asking?
I asked, for example, is it
Very interesting.
given
It's very fun.
given the potential of AI, would it be possible technologically to establish a communist society according to the vision of Karl Marx in China by 2049? And then it outlined exactly how that pathway might be achieved in terms of the technology and human organization required to establish the type of image that Karl Marx had about that new society. So, for example, the question that was raised in the 1930s in the main academic debate about whether socialism is viable or not between what you now call the neoliberals, or it was the man was called Ludwig von Mises, and Hayek, the theoreticians of monetarism, the basis of the precursors to monetarism, better said, which is they argue that prices have within them the information necessary to govern circulation operations within a marketplace, and that planning can never replace that. That was the argument they made. Planning can never replace the pricing mechanism as the distribution mechanism in the world. And then I asked, would AI, in the circumstances of it being an encapsulator of knowledge to a far higher degree in theory than prices, could that replace what prices do and make the planning system viable? And it came up with very, very good answers to those questions. That doesn't mean they're correct answers, but it does mean that I spent 8 years writing my PhD between the year 2010 and 2018. I looked into pretty much, well, the majority of articles or books on political economy of China. I studied them. I studied nearly all the Western assessments of Chinese political economy. But within a few days of cross-referencing and checking, both inputting my PhD and also cross-referencing and checking the information, the responses from the Chinese and the Western AI systems, the responses were close to, and in some cases superior to, my own PhD, which was considered by leading academics when I passed my PhD at the Viva to be a unique contribution to human knowledge. It surpassed my contribution. In the sense that once I put my contribution in and I drew on other sources and new prompts, because it can garner and master information in a way that a human being is less able to do, there are some areas where it will easily outstrip a human being. Programming is another example. If you do I never used to do programming. Or better said, the only programming I did was in the late 1990s, and I forgot about it. And then I came back into programming only 3 months ago. Now I can do Python, I can do JSS, I can do websites, I can do all sorts of programming tasks that I never thought possible and that I wanted to do before. I wanted to have something that would garner certain news sources for me, extract them for me, turn them into a Word file that I could print out and go and do some reading and cross it out. It will do that, which no other program I've ever encountered has been able to do. And I made that program in my communication with the machine.
Can I just say that I'm
Sorry, let me strike on the point.
I was just wondering, can you comment on the cultural control that the tech companies that are producing these models are evaluating? Because the model itself is sort of fine-tuned to be more safe, and that safety is sort of
one of the reasons why, if not the main reason why, the Western powers went into a panic when DeepSeek was released, was because it's an open source model. And therefore you can download it, put it on your computer and adjust it and amend it as you choose. Those censorship laws, even though DeepSeek, if you go on and type in who is Xi Jinping, will give no response. And that's what the Western media focused on. But if you download it and load in information on Xi Jinping, it will give you whatever response you want. Right? And in fact, it's utterly surprising. If you do look at Quen, for example, which is a Chinese Alibaba open source program, if you ask it questions about China, it will refer to China as an authoritarian state, which is certainly not what the Chinese government wants. So they will gradually move, the website sources like that will move towards a tighter control. But if you download the programs yourself and you amend the open source software, it's the foundation for an entirely new framework of scientific and technical knowledge. And it will be without any censorship whatsoever.
I've got a few things to say.
You don't even have to run it on the internet. You run it on your own local computer. And in a couple of years' time, your phone will be capable of running the entire information of ChatGPT. It will have your own model on your own phone, even without being connected to the internet. In a few years' time, when the technology has compressed it, and when the ability of the machinery has improved. At the moment, to run the entire thing of ChatGPT, sorry, not ChatGPT, DeepSeek, you'd have to have a computer costing about £30,000. But you all know that a computer that costs £30,000 today will be in a rubbish bin in 5 years' time, right? You all know that. So the technology will be there. Now, does that mean that it'll be useless? No. A Kalashnikov was invented in the Second World War. They still use them today in fighting warfare, right?
I just want to say that, I mean, it's good that you've done a PhD because then you understand my methodology here. And I just want to talk about the two things. One, that is quite arbitrary and theoretical to say that 95% accuracy, this is...
I said 90.
90%. Because how are you going to measure that? It's not
it's my
mathematics.
opinion, my subjective opinion.
How did you measure that?
My
That's the first
subjective
thing.
opinion.
Your subjective opinion.
I probably could create
and
a method.
methodology and how you measure
I
a 90%
probably
accuracy,
could create
something that isn't factual. It's hypothetical.
Okay, let's look
and
at
the second thing, can I just say,
Go.
and people can disagree with me here, but Marxism, essentially on paper, really good. When it comes to actually employing it, I think the majority of people here can agree that no, it didn't work out. There will be obstacles with what ChatGPT says is great, and this is how you would do it, the algorithm on how to implement this specific thing. You will run into obstacles when you actually implement it in the real world.
Well, that may be the case, and you can,
Broadly,
you can run
brilliant.
simulations
What
of
you're
that
saying,
as well.
I completely agree. Broadly, AI is phenomenal, and we should definitely use it, but it's not foolproof. And there'll be obstacles that we never anticipated.
As soon as I started the meeting, I said, my opinion,
Fine, yep.
90%. Now, 90% is a big gap between 100%, right?
I'm curious how you got that 90%.
Let me just refer you to the argument that is made, for example, about climate change. I asked the GPT, for example, to tell me the strongest and the weakest, the strongest arguments for and against man-made climate change. And you know what the strongest argument was said to be by GPT? 97 to 99% of agreement amongst climate scientists that human activities, particularly burning fossil fuel and deforestation, are the primary drivers of global warming. That's one of the strongest. The scientific consensus is 90 to 99%. I later went on and countered it because it presented also the counter arguments to that. I countered it and said, well, the logical argument everybody should know, although a lot of people don't know, because the very fact that a lot of people will turn around to you when you raise this question, regardless of whether you're right or not, a lot of people will turn around to you and say exactly this argument. They will say 97 to 99% of scientists agree, as if that's an argument. That's only that's a statement about the present representation of the discussion. It has no scientific validity apart from the fact that they're arguing that so many people say that. It doesn't mean anything whatsoever. But if you question it, to be fair, and even GPT, which is inbuilt bias towards this argument, they will accept that the scientific consensus is no relevant to science. They accept it. It's accepted in the discussion I've had here. It's accepted. So, and of course it's accepted, because there would be no science if it was all about consensus. We'd still believe that the sun rises and sets, that it revolves around the earth. We'd still believe that if we accepted the scientific consensus. It looks like that, seems like that, the sun's going down, surely it revolves around the earth. That's what man thought. For the overwhelming majority of human history, we thought that. How could we have thought anything else? That's what we saw. That's what appeared to be reality.
But consensus isn't fixed, is it?
Sorry?
Consensus by its very nature moves.
Consensus, the fact is, consensus
then
in
is not the
science
same as consensus.
is irrelevant. That's the point. Consensus in science is irrelevant. So therefore, that's why I say, when I say 90% accurate, It doesn't mean that I'm saying you have to bow down and give faith to it. It means this is a tool you can use, and I'm telling you, in my opinion, it's more accurate than the news media. It's more accurate than TikTok. It's more accurate and more useful than any of those standard web resources, and therefore it is a revolution in our relationship to machinery. And that revolution in relationship to machinery means there is a tool at our disposal which we can use for human liberation. It's the pinnacle, to date, of the development of science and technology in the hands of human beings. And we must now, and I mean now, that's why the urgency, now we must gain control of it before it loses that ability to be an instrument of our control, before it becomes an instrument just of Elon Musk, just of the powers that be, to rule over us, control us with drones, robots and machinery to manipulate the mind. I sent you this week this piece on the dynamics of robotics and technology. If a few people wanted to seize control of the world, why do you think Macron said this week he's going to spend $100 billion US on AI? Why do you think the British government ran off and said we're going to spend billions on AI? Why do you think the American government said they're going to spend $500 billion on AI? Because there is a battle for the future control of the world taking place. And what I am arguing is that in that battle, the mass of the working people of the world can play their own role in forging their own tools to make their own new world, rather than that controlled by the tyranny and dictatorship of the capitalists and imperialists who control the world today. That's the essence of my argument. And I know I can't. You don't have to agree with my own point of view, but the idea that technology should be left to them, or just to play around, or it's just stupid and it knows that it can produce nothing new, is false. And if you make any effort to use this technology, you'll see that within a few minutes. Any effort. You spend one half a day using that technology to ask questions of relevance and interest to you, and you will discover it is not a dead tool, simply feeding back information that is manipulated information. That's not what's going on, and that is different to what happened, for example, under COVID, under the so-called pandemic. They were lying to us systematically. Now they will present you with that information. The consensus said this, but you can cross-question it. And if your brain works in a critical way, then that cross-questioning will produce, even with the most conservative viewpoints system like ChatGPT, it will produce results that show you what's wrong. So it allows your critical faculties to follow themselves through until such time as you disprove the original false hypothesis it might present to you. So that's the argument I'm making. Are there any further questions, contributions?
Did you see the film? Is it Her?
No.
Or shit about the guy who basically falls in love with his laptop.
Okay.
They get a new updated.
We've got that already, though,
it's a feasible future. I think it's a feasible future.
So a friend of mine, I posted something last week on the internet, and by the way, whenever I post something now on the internet, nobody sees it. They've basically algorithmed me out. But when I posted something on the internet, a couple of friends saw it, and one of them, I am doing that. One of them turned around and said, "Can you tell?" It's a friend of mine, and she said, "Can you ask it how to get a boyfriend?" And then, which I did then, and I said, and then it returned and it said. An artist in London. She's an artist, and I said, an artist in London. I said, how could she find a boyfriend? I said, a real or virtual one. And then it gave the two options. A real one. I said, a robot with AI implanted into its brain and able to talk to you, as opposed to a human being. And then it was all about the benefits and negative about the two relationships. I'll leave you to look later on at what I post on that when I post that, to decide yourselves which you think is superior.
I can recommend that film.
Which you think is superior. I'm sure there are things like that, yeah. I've done my speech for the day. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the speech.
High control, everyone.
Piers Corbyn, the next speaker.
Someone else.